Now, just a disclaimer here, the top 10 greatest games of all time is based on Hypebeastman's opinion, my opinion. You're allowed to share your thoughts, although the reality is I wouldn't necessarily care regardless. This video here that you're about to witness has been in production for 2 to 3 months, of not just editing progress, but for the scripts and ideas I had for quite some time now, which is why it has been delayed since December. Thankfully, I found the hidden pieces to a video I hope you wouldn't forget. Video games are awesome, but what makes video games what they are today? Throughout these years, they seem to evolve and start to improve the more we play because it's addicting and active. Now, I don't just pick up a controller and say whether or not the game is either good or bad. I actually make sure I have more than enough to say why I love a certain game. This video will not only do that and explain why these are my greatest games of all time, but why I can really appreciate their existence. And yes, these are my favorite games. We're going through 10 through 6 today, and within the next video will be the finale of Hypebeastman's greatest games of all time to ever exist in the dinosaur age. But before we start, I also want to give some honorable mentions to games that couldn't make the cut. Not that they couldn't make the cut, unfortunately, it's just that I didn't have enough space. And some of these games actually were in my top 10 at one point, but because there was just so many games I've been playing lately that I fell in love with, the rest of them just couldn't make it. It's as simple as that. But these games are no doubt unique projects that I fell in love with, and they're still considered to be in my greatest games of all time. Although they're not exactly in the top 10, they're still projects that is worth to try out at least once, if anything. Some are old, some are new, who gives a shit? Video games will always be awesome, regardless what era they come from, how old they are, or how new they'll be, as long as the quality and the context refers to on how much they've worked on it. You know, it's just as simple as that. Video games that inspired, influenced, or just changed the industry forever. This is a perfect example and a perfect time to mention it because, well, there was just so many. You know what I mean? There's just so many. Yeah, probably just get to the point already and mention 10 through 6. Please, Hypebeastman. Well, yeah, we're gonna get into the point. The thing is, you already know how I want these things to be done. And exactly is how I'm going to get it done, so get off me. Starting with WWE All-Stars, I fell in love with this game, and at the time it was definitely my favorite. Wrestling games have impacted me as a kid, and Eddie Guerrero was one of my favorite wrestlers. Jumping in the air and shit. Of course, there's Super Mario 64. This was another game that was in the list until something removed it. And then Super Ghouls and Ghouls or shit like that. Great project, one of my favorites. Ratchet and Clank. This at one point was in my top 3, but something in the list completely changed its mind. So yeah. And last but not least, Sekiro's Shadow Dies Twice. Thanks to Miyazaki, the Soul series is my favorite genre of video games because of its difficulty. I love difficulty in video games, and I think it balances in a way that I feel like it's my fault instead of the game's fault. No pinpointing here, this is one of my favorite games of all time. And in general, video games will continuously evolve, and we already mentioned its honorable mention. Now, here's the real deal of the top 10 greatest games of all time. So grab your popcorn, your snacks, hit the movie theaters because this is about to be a real one. And, well, like, subscribe, and enjoy. Number 10, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. Some of you might be questioning what makes the 4th installment to the franchise better than 1 and 2, and why 4 over 3. Well, part of it is nostalgia. Pro Skater 4 was the first Tony Hawk game I played, and skating while pulling off insane amount of tricks and roaming throughout the streets is more than enough for me to see why these projects were so freaking awesome. And of course, because it's my opinion. Go make your own list, although it doesn't mean shit to me. Look, they were better times, before I had to worry about paying bills, before struggling to even find a job, before realizing that I might be single forever. I still remember owning the jam-packed winter 2002, a disc filled with a roster of PlayStation's best titles, and one of them was Pro Skater 4. Well, as a demo, of course. And the more I played, the better I got, and the more I realized how addicted I was getting. It had a lot to offer, like missions or random NPCs, crashing windows, hop on cars, even do tricks on them. As a kid, shit like this grew fond of me, and sometimes the most simplest things are better than the most hardworking things. Number 9, Life is Strange. Video games started to evolve and focus more on the story rather than an appropriate tone for the community to decide what makes a game good or how it should stand out. It was difficult choosing the first and Before the Storm, but if I gave my honest suggestion, I would say the original. Life is Strange focuses on a young girl that has these abilities to rewind time and change what the future has in store. What I love about Life is Strange approach is that there is always a cause. You have a choice, and depending on your selections to your answer, it can not only affect the surroundings, but your own personal perspective, as if you feel you made the wrong choice. Luckily, because Max can go back and rewind, you're able to fix your choice you feel is right, and depending on your choice is the ending you'll get, leaving the player to either feel satisfied or start to wonder if there was another option. Life is Strange was my first platinum trophy, and I bet you know why. Life is Strange has a unique concept that not only works for the player but as a game. Characters, motives, understanding yourself and why you was brought here, and interactions that can cause the future to change for the better or worse. All this goes to show why I fell in love with 1 and Before the Storm, and why it's among the top 10 greatest games of all time. It's one of those games I can always go back to and replay without getting tired of it because of its story and its approach on how these choices could affect you as the player and your environment, and that's what I love about Life is Strange. Number 8 is Star Wars Battlefront 2. Not this shit. I wasn't really into Star Wars, but for some reason I owned some DVDs and games, and one that stood out for me was this masterpiece. Playing Heroes vs Villains mod was such a good feeling because I always pick the villains. They're just fucking badass. What the newer Battlefront failed to do was that they went for a modern approach with what almost every game that's popular does with those crappy loot boxes crap or whatever. Listen, old is gold, and this is gold. This just takes me back, and when I decided to hook up my PS2, this is one of the games I put on. General Grievous is my favorite character. It was just satisfying treating everyone like a ragdoll around, and I just felt unstoppable. Pulling up with those 4 lightsabers, I was a beast. I kicked my cousin's ass so bad, they all joined my side, the dark side. These rankings aren't just based on nostalgia or having a good time, it's quality. And these titles are way better than the first-person shooters you see today. I may not be the biggest Star Wars fan, but if I would say what game is a perfect example of how they should approach a Star Wars game, this is it, without question. Number 7, BioShock. Entering the underwater city of Rapture, I somehow knew I would get a feeling like no other playing this for the first time. It's not every day I play something random and say this is the greatest shit ever. Believe it or not, I recently played this entire series, but none of them compares to the first. BioShock is a classic, and it's not difficult to understand. The developers took an interesting step like no other FPS games have done in the past, leaving you with thoughts like, what did I just finish playing? Does this even exist? What have I been doing this entire time? Right as soon as you drop down to the underwater Rapture to gain strange abilities, fight foes who seem at a lost cause, and either harvest or rescue the little sisters with no purpose or an exact meaning until a sign of betrayal opens a path of thought of wondering what have you been doing up until a certain point in the game. It was such a cool feel to witness, and I'm glad I did. Also, there are these things called Big Daddies. They're pretty tough, but if you take them out, the game rewards you with useful items needed to progress much quicker. Also, when you die in this game, you don't actually die. It's like a respawn, but better than other projects that attempted. Not only BioShock is one of the most inspirational, but one of the greatest games of all time, according to me. So yeah, but there is one left for this video that tops it all. If you was wondering what game took the spot and replaced Ratchet & Clank, this one was it. Don't get me wrong, I love Ratchet & Clank. The series just couldn't keep up with me, not like the Ori series. And I know I said I couldn't pick between 2 games I loved in that franchise with LIS, but at least one had more to do with it than the other. With this one, it's like I couldn't pick. For a game I recently reviewed, you probably didn't expect this to happen so soon. I pretty much mentioned everything about the series in my review, taking that next step into the narrative direction and settings of the player like me wishing it wouldn't end. And after Blind Forest, heading into Will of the Wisps had me asking for more. That's exactly what it did. I wish I can go back in time and rewind like Max to revisit the franchise again for the first time. I had never seen an approach like this in a video game, and I have never expected it to be done in a Metroidvania out of all genres of gaming. To me, Ori took that next step in what I felt like I've waited for so long. A devastating ending, yet I just couldn't see myself being sad with the outcome because I'm glad it exists in the first place. Without Ori, there would be no top 10. And without top 10, there would be no Hypebeastman. Ori isn't only the best Metroidvania game to me personally, it's one of the greatest titles to ever exist, according to me. But this is all just my opinion. Leave your thoughts and let me know what do you feel about my top 10 so far. This is just part 1 of part 2. The remaining will be 5 through 1. And this is when shit starts to get real. It's when I start to get serious with my rankings for the top 10 greatest games of all time. And well, peace. I'll see you around for the next one.